Hello there and welcome to a very special episode of Marketing Room 101, the podcast where I invite marketers for a good old rant and give them the chance to banish one thing from the industry forever. I'm Ben Norman, your host and self-appointed guardian of Marketing Room 101, and in my day job I head up strategy at Principles, a brand comms agency in Leeds, and I started this podcast because I both deeply love and occasionally loathe the marketing world. So I wanted to provide a safe space for those who feel the same to vent and banish their nemesis forever. This episode is very special as I'm joined by my first ever guest with royal honours, Trevor Robinson OBE. Not only that, but he's probably part of the reason I decided to work in this industry in the first place. Because he and his creative partner came up with Been Tango'd, a campaign I remember so vividly from when I was a kid, and one of many in a brilliant era that really made me fall in love with advertising. Since then, Trevor's gone on to have an extraordinary career, which has seen him set up Quiet Storm, the creative agency he still runs today, as well as Create Not Hate, an initiative to help more marginalised inner-city young people unlock their creative potential. It's hard not to feel inspired by Trevor, not only for what he's achieved, but by his absolutely unwavering passion for great creative. I get the impression he's just as driven today to create work that people might laugh about and talk about with their mates as he was 30 years ago. So here's my conversation with Trevor Robinson OBE. Trevor Robinson OBE, welcome to Marketing Room 101.
Pleased to be here.
Now, you say you're pleased to be here, but before we start, could you please just set the scene for our listeners and give them an idea of what it's actually like here in Marketing Room 101?
I think what I think the room is like, fairly dark, flashing, nonsensical, boring. And I think that's the key thing for me is negativity and boredom and force feeding you by repetition the same boring idea and the same kind of hard sell. The thing that I detest about advertising at its worst, it's all about throwing money at a problem and not great ideas. And in that tedium, and I'm really bad at staying awake in meetings, full stop. If it's long, drawn out, boring, people using their little sound bites and using their abbreviated, cool terms to say something that should be very straightforward. And those things do tend to scare the hell out of me and bore the hell out of me at the same time. Jargon is things that people love in our industry. Anything that can kind of smoke and mirror away from actually, I don't know what I'm doing, or I'm pretending I'm knowing what I'm doing. And that bamboozling bullshit that you find in advertising can be a bit tedious. And for me, like kryptonite, really.
So in this boring room full of tedium, full of jargon, full of everything that isn't conducive towards creative thinking, do you think that this scenario in this room is more common now than it was when you first entered the industry?
It's one of those things, and you don't want to feel like some old, boring, the good old days of advertising. I definitely remember being at school and people coming in excited about something that they had seen on TV and knowing word for word something that had been on the TV. And you just felt like, wow, at times. Like Heineken ad, Benson and Hedges, Silk Cup posters. There were the Hamlet ads, the bouncing bombs. There always used to be something that people would kind of go, wow. And in some ways it was more entertaining than the programs that you were watching. And it felt like another world, untouchable world of Adland when I was a kid. And there was a real reverence to the work, the real kind of excitement, I guess is the key thing.
Yeah.
So I suppose it's the absolute opposite to what's in the room that I was suggesting. There's a real buzz about it. And it felt like people would get behind the ad and it was like really important and you knew it would shape people's lives, not just the people who was meant to buy into the ads, but the people who made the ads.
Perhaps we'll get into that a little bit more in a short while. But before we do, I think many people will rightly know you for your creative work, iconic tango campaigns, the Been Tango'd stuff back in the day, the great work on Haribo in more recent years, and I guess hundreds of campaigns, perhaps maybe thousands for household names over the years. And I imagine there's not a single person listening to this who won't have laughed at some point at something you've made, which I think is quite a nice thought.
That's a really lovely thing to say. Jesus.
I would expect, those campaigns, everybody's laughing at them, and I presume they've all reached every person that's listening to this. I would
think of it like that. Obviously that's an ambition. You want to do things that people like and people enjoy and find entertaining, not just you're selling me something. Even when I first started Quiet Storm, I always said, I've seen us being in the entertainment business. And I remember at the time, people just like looking at me like, what are you talking about, this ads? But that's how I've always seen it, as an opportunity to do something that somebody may go, have you seen that? That was funny. That was good. That was, that's what I feel is my job to do.
In the first episode of this podcast, I spoke to Paul Feldrick, and Paul made a similar observation, seeing advertising as showmanship as opposed to salesmanship. And I know there are different types of advertising, but I definitely think that's the sort of job that I wanted to come into. That's the sort of thing that gets me excited. And that's the sort of stuff that works, isn't it?
I agree with that wholeheartedly. We always started off, even from when you're in the office, coming up with ideas with your mates, and you're trying to make each other laugh. You're trying to entertain each other. Yeah. You're trying to put something on the table that you go, if we could just do that. And you start with that. And I guess the legs of that particular spider gets pulled off as you try and get it past internally, externally, and even make it. That's one of the reasons that I ended up wanting to direct my own work, because you spend all this time coming up with the ideas. You've got a vision for it. And the director, of course, even the best of them won't have the same vision as you. And I think when you're working on it and you believe in ads and you love the work that you're doing, you're not going to just shoehorn the name of the brand in. It's going to be integral to your idea. So that's why I've always wanted to make my idea. And I thought, if anybody's going to mess it up, it would be me. Then blame this poor director who hasn't lived with this baby for as long as you have.
It's a confident move. You take away the excuse, don't you?
Yeah. I mean, like, the amount of times we'd be blaming the directors. She didn't turn up on time. She didn't understand the idea. She did one edit and she was off. And invariably, I can't blame them, because they would just like, if you're given a film to turn around in a couple of days and you've only looked at it for 2 weeks, it's not surprising that it comes across as being a little bit ham-fisted and a bit crap. That's why I always tend to be that person that's all over everything, from photography, doing something digitally. I'm always trying to put myself in the headset of somebody who I'm trying to sell to, trying to entertain.
I think that's come across in the work. You can tell that there is that string between the idea and the execution. But I think perhaps what people might be less familiar with than your creative work is Create Not Hate, which you founded in 2007, I believe it was. And you say that aims to bring young, talented Black kids from diverse backgrounds into the advertising industry. With that in mind, what do you think is wrong with the ad industry's approach to diversity, and what needs to change?
Two things here. I've been running my own place for around 30 years. So my perception is always from the outside as much as anybody else, because I'm not in those agencies. I always wanted to, like you said, I wanted to bring in, because I grew up with people that were far more gifted and more intelligent, more talented than I was. And they ended up as bus drivers and ended up doing anything other than advertising. Or if they're lucky, they got in the music industry, or, the usual cliched sportsman or something. And when I got into advertising, I was blown away by the opportunities, not just being a creative. You could be so many different things. And I wanted people to see that in my community, but I also wanted people to see, like, the thing that I really don't understand how people don't get this. I remember thinking I had an edge over some of the people that I was in the industry. I knew there were people better educated than I was, very smart people. But I always felt I understood how to entertain normal people more than they did. I used to sit there and listen to them, and they were all lovely Oxford grads and Cambridge and stuff. But I really can't see you making my mum laugh. They just don't think like us. And I think if you have an opportunity to create something like Create Not Hate, where you can bring in people who have really, like, that's what we tend to use them a lot as well. When we coming up with ideas, we run it past our Create Not Hate people, and they educate you all the time. They help your ideas become stronger and a lot more tangible and a lot more connected to the outside world. And I think these kids are just so honest and so on it, and they know so much more than I do. And I think the advertising industry are not utilizing those things. They're getting their data, but they're not getting real connections to people, and they're not really tapping into the talent that's out there. And I wanted the advertising industry to see that as an important revenue and not a token, oh, yes, we must get people of color in the industry. And it doesn't seem to equate to, actually, you will sell more, you will be better, you will be more relevant if you do have people of that. And I wanted to create a means to get at the talent before they go off and choose other industries. Because Because nowadays it's even a harder sell because the advertising that you're seeing on the telly is not the calling card it was when I was coming in. Like, it just seems to be a sea of banality and a bit like cars and like in fashion. Cars used to be really characterful. You know, you'd see an MG here and an Aston Martin and all that, and you'd salivate and stop in your tracks. And now, because of the way they're designed, everything looks the same. An expensive car looks just like a cheap car. You know, you get sitting in them and you just feel like you're sitting in a very plush toilet. But it's just
I love that.
It has no character. And I think that's what advertising's become, this streamline because of technology, because of data. All the creativity is being sucked out of it, and you're left with this kind of artificial banality that looks like everybody else. I remember when Guinness Surfer came through, it blew me away, and I was drawing a floor full of green envy, and I was like, oh, fuck, that's an ad. That's a brilliant, powerful ad, you know, like, wow. And I'm never going to forget that. I even remember where I was when it first came on. And I think the commercial was intended to be a 60-second commercial or 90-second, but they took Glazer's rough cut and went, wow, this has to be, I'm not sure how long it was, like 90 in the end. I said to the client, this is the way it needs to go out. And the client went, okay, let's do it. Yeah. You're lucky if you get a 30-second commercial now, much less. It's all 20s, and it's kind of, you're trying to create these stories and capture people's hearts and minds, and you've got 10 seconds or 20 seconds to do it.
On social media, they're saying, right, you've got 1 second before they scroll or skip.
And people are terrified of long lengths because even though we'll sit through 3 hours of Dune, they can't see how people won't be entertained by a longer format. And we're creating these traps for ourselves, which stops things from having a unique personality and an opportunity to entertain people.
And I think what I found particularly interesting about Create Not Hate, touching on some of the points you've just made there, is that it goes far beyond just diversity in the sense of ethnicity. Yeah. And it's much more about different experiences, isn't it? Different backgrounds, people who haven't been to private school, people who don't just live in certain areas of London. How do you think that benefits the end product? What have you seen as being the benefit of bringing those experiences into the work?
I sort of like experienced myself and also seen it with the kids in the class. Like, for instance, after George Floyd was murdered, we did one about how do you stop racism? And that's a pretty big subject to kind of crack and to throw on some kids. Hey, stop racism, you know. Yeah. And what was interesting, we was in Croydon, they were saying that they were being stopped and searched on the way to come to the session. And like one of the women that was there who's with their son was saying, it was really ironic because there was a Black Lives Matter poster on the street and her son was handcuffed while she was searched for no reason. And it was just like another world to me because even though I'm Black, I live in a very middle class, safe. My kids don't get stopped and searched. In my car, I don't get pulled over anymore. It doesn't really happen. But we're just in Croydon and it's like another world. And they were saying these concepts and like basically saying they don't see me. And one of the guys, Emmanuel, who eventually worked with us, did the Romeo and Juliet one. He said if all they see is this cliched vision of who I am, they don't see that I love Shakespeare. They don't see that I love listening to Frank Sinatra. And that's what, when we did it as an idea, we just brought that to life. It's not something that's only middle-aged men can do in advertising. And if you have intelligent people that you're talking to, you're going to invariably come up with ideas that will affect other people as well. It's like a good stand-up comic. All they're doing is mirroring what they're seeing. And I believe that's what happens when you're working with these kids, and it makes your ideas stronger. So I agree with you totally that there's such an importance to get people that aren't the same, not just saying diversity, but have people with different opinions, have men and women that don't get on, don't agree straight away, and create that empathy. And then I think you really can communicate to everyone.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So before we get into what you want to banish, if you think back to the days when you were sofa surfing around London, when you were trying to get a job in advertising, what do you think that guy wanted to achieve in his career? And how do you think that compares to what you have gone on to do?
It's quite interesting. Somebody asked me that over the weekend. I was at a party and then discussing how I got into the advertising industry. And I remember saying to him at the time that guy who's 20-year-old kid whose desires to get into advertising, and they just took so much knockbacks. You'd go to interviews and you'd walk into these big, flashy environments, and you wouldn't see anybody who looked like you in the building, the whole building. And I remember thinking what I wanted to achieve is to do something that no one had seen before and entertain people in a way that I worked with a guy called Al Young, and he's from Scotland. And we used to get on like a house on fire and make each other laugh and all that. And I remember thinking, if we can bring some of this uniqueness between me, kid from Clapham, black kid, Edinburgh, we created something that was unique. And I felt that's what I wanted to try and achieve. And I never saw myself running my old agency or even being a director at that time. I just really wanted to tell stories and get ideas out there that will affect people and meet people when they're at work. They go, oh, did you see that? And have a bit of a chuckle about it, which what I love about getting complete strangers who don't know you, who have no idea who you are, don't care. And for one moment, you've affected them.
I remember you telling an anecdote on another podcast about waking up on the train and hearing people talking about You've Been Tango'd. And I guess that's a similar moment, isn't it? You can win all the awards under the sun, you can hear all the stats from the client, but hearing somebody unscripted, unprovoked, talking about your campaign.
Yeah, there's nothing more. Like when we were talking about Tango, there's such a potential. We had a client who's like going, I want to scare Coca-Cola. I want to make people within my company go, wow, who's this guy? He was really ambitious, but he was like going, over to you guys. We had bosses there who also said, over to you guys. We'll back you. And they backed the idea. It was a real push by everybody. Back then, people would just go, right, it's over to you. And I'm going to trust you because you're the mechanic here.
I sort of wonder if a little bit of the respect for the creative profession may have faded in recent years as this sort of creator economy has come around. I don't know if there's anything in that, but this idea of anybody with a blog, anybody with an Instagram page, all of a sudden is creating content. And a lot of it, yes, is great, but they're creating content for themselves, not necessarily to a commercial end. And I think maybe a lot of that distinction has perhaps been lost.
I 100% agree with that. What's an entertaining idea? And if I say I've got 2 million people clicking on and everybody goes, right, that's a success. And then they go, right, if we get that person and then say our name a couple of times, our brand name, people are going to run out and buy this product. You can see with the data, it's not happening like that. It's not entertaining. Like you say, that person's entertaining, but do I believe they buy into my brand? I'm not sure. My kids will sort of like say, just because they say it, we're not stupid enough to believe it. Just because I like this person doesn't mean I have to run out and get the same face cream. And also, we know they're being paid to sell this. People are a lot smarter than they're given credit for. And they know when they're being sold to, when they're being made to feel that a brand has some kind of importance, and they know it doesn't.
I sort of think there's something quite liberating and quite exciting when you accept that people don't care about your brand. It gives you a bit of freedom then, doesn't it? It's like people don't care about brands. They don't largely follow brands on social media. There are exceptions, but for the most part, if you are working with Tango, you're working with Haribo, whatever it might be, you've just got freedom to go out there and entertain and try and make it famous right through a great idea.
I think so. And I think you just like trying to resonate with people. Like, I've got this amount of time to capture your imagination and make you think, oh, I might taste that. And that's our job.
If you're a marketer and you're free on the 5th of February, get yourself to Leeds for Every Second Counts, but which counts the most? The event that Principles Agency, along with Boutique Media, are putting on to give you the chance to hear from leading marketers and channel experts as they unpick the confusing shitstorm of modern media and help you understand the true value of every second of attention paid to any channel so you can make better decisions in 2025. To find out more and get a free ticket code if you're a brand, drop me, Ben Norman, or Principles Agency a message on LinkedIn. You're here today because you want to banish something from our industry and put it into Marketing Room 101. What would you like to banish, please?
Ooh, this was a really weird one because my brain just didn't work like this. But the key thing that I would say is fear. You know, fear of a good idea, fear of change. I do think there's, in advertising, especially now, if you put a new idea on the table, even though everybody's saying, yes, I want a new idea, you could feel the air sucked out the room at times with fear because it's new. And what I find in advertising that tends to happen a lot is people use the fear of something, the fear of really getting your work noticed as well. I've actually had clients say to me, well, people will really talk about this. And almost saying, I'm not sure if I want people to talk about this, like, because the louder that everybody looks at something, the more, if they don't like it, it's going to be backlash against you. And like now, fear of getting it wrong, especially when it comes to diversity and non-binary, and it's like, I was looking at the ad the other day for Heinz, and they were getting a whole lot of backlash because they haven't used black people in the right way, and it completely hot oiled in everybody's face in terms of getting it wrong. And I remember just talking to people internally, and they were asking my opinion. But what was really disheartening was the creatives kind of going, thank God I hadn't done that. I hadn't made that mistake. I didn't get Turkey of the Week, and I think that in the old days, you were just trying to do something that people would set up. You'd never ever thought about what happens if it's crap. And like, believe me, I've done some stuff like we did years ago for Pepe Jeans, and it's got to be the worst ad I've ever done. And Al and I, we went from a very simple idea, was all about laughter and, not taking life seriously, and better to sit around on the grass with your mates in your jeans. You lounge around on the grass and all that. You wouldn't do that in a suit. And we ended up creating this ad that was the opposite to that. It was a nightmare ad. We just got it wrong. And that's one of the days when I woke up and go, right, I'm going to direct my own stuff in the future. You can take this lovely idea and you end up having something that's a nightmare. But luckily, we had employees and people around us and said, right, they're fired. You're out, mate, for doing that. Just was written off. It just, not really spoken about, and just got on with your life and try to do your best the next time around. And I think that the fear of failure, the fear of being recognized as not being that good, that's why so many ads, I think, has always got these lovely little word plays, because people are justifying their talent with like, poor creativity. For me, you're just trying to come across as smart as opposed to doing something that's relevant and that's something that's going to have a real connection to people. You're just trying to be the wittiest person in the room as opposed to trying to use the opportunity to do something that will have impact.
What do you think is behind this fear? What have you seen in the transition? Because it sounds like when you came into the industry, I'm sure there was still fear, but less so than now. What was a particular point you think where it started to change?
I think the key thing is knowledge. The smoke and mirrors of advertising used to help us. And when they started throwing ads, you can have some ads with the media spend. And as soon as they took out the importance of creativity, and I got to say, when I first came in the industry, creators did have big heads and were treated like gods, and people would get you caps everywhere. And it's easily you become spoiled, easily become kind of full of yourself, and you have to kick yourself and kind of go, hang on, mate, you just do ads. But at that stage, there was an importance and a value to an idea. And I think, like you said earlier, it's something that's diminished because there's not that much evidence of fantastic advertising anymore. And if it's devalued in what you're seeing as well, you're not seeing those big blockbuster ads where you go, wow, who did that? I'd love to be involved with that. That looks amazing. That's going to live with me forever. And some good ads did do that. And then now it's very rare you see something where you're going to say to your mates, you got to watch this. And I remember waiting for the ads to come around so I could see it again. Imagine doing that now. We can't wait to fast forward past ads now.
Do you think you touched on research earlier? And I think that's a really interesting point when it comes to fear of creativity, because I suppose, like you said, how many of the great ads, how many of the ads that really work, if they were pre-tested, either in modern ways or even in the old school ways of asking a focus group what they think to an ad after they've watched it 5 times. What sort of impact do you think research is having now on fear in creativity?
Tell you what, the main thing it's doing is creating banality, because you're creating a formula for an idea. You're creating, like, this happens at this stage, this happens at the end. You have the pack shot. You make sure you say the product 6 times. You have a lovely song that is a very popular song that everybody will be singing to, tick, tick. And everybody's doing the same thing and everybody's copying the same formula. So therefore, the ads that are coming out feel exactly the same as everything else. And I think that's where the problem lies. Research is good when it stops you from making a big mistake. But when it starts to dictate what a good idea is, and when it starts creating the structure to what a good idea is, you'll end up doing bland stuff that is just like everybody else, because everybody's got the same rule book. I remember being shown the D&AD as the Bible, and if I want to do good ads, it has to be good enough to get in the D&D. And for some reason, I don't remember. Now I know why. I hated that. I hated somebody telling me, this is how you do an ad. Go away and do it. Because actually, we did do that. Me and my partner, Al, trying to do ads that would please ad people. Very clever, stylish ads, but they were soulless. And if you looked at it, you were like, that's nice, but I could have done that. The uniqueness of individuals can have to affect what a good idea is. I remember when Blackcurrant Tango's first, I think it was Jim Bolton came running into our office, me and Al, and was banging on about this ad. And I was like, that sounds terrible, when he left the room, obviously. And Al goes, no, it's brilliant. It's an absolute brilliant ad. I was like, really? And then when I saw it on TV, and I went, oh my God, how come I didn't see it? And it didn't go by any formula. And you just kind of go, wow, that's an idea. That's a big idea. And I didn't see it. And I think the problem with research, with people who go to college and university to learn about marketing and what's a good idea, what's a bad idea, they've already come in with all this baggage and they all think they know how to do it. And that's why we're ending up with these very tidy, formulaic, boring executions.
I think it's a really interesting point. And I think there's almost an irony at play at the moment where the industry seems to have all collectively woken up to the research about emotion, realizing that if you can trigger some form of emotive reaction, you can build a brand for the longer term. But as a result, we're now taking a very rational approach to something emotive. We're trying to create a rational approach and a rational formula for something that is so irrational and so nuanced as entertainment that could create emotion.
I find it surreal. And like recently, the last year's come from Cannes, where all the ads were becoming very stylized, slick, with a meaning in it, like associating themselves with certain movements. But what was coming out was it feeling very trite and very cold. And I remember I was on the committee for the Titanium, and I remember when one funny ad came up and we were all laughing and was like almost relief to have something that was truly funny. And I just find it so surreal that we need to look at it like that. But I notice when brands do something wrong and you think, wow, how did that slip so quickly? How did they become the enemy so quickly? I think it's not that. I think they're just so bland. And any reason that people can put the boot in on you, they will do, because they have no love for you. You've not built up a credit of humanity and warmth. So therefore people just go, right, I'm glad. I want to see Pepsi fail badly because they got a diversity subject wrong. It was like how quickly all those boots were flying in. I really think it is because they've not built up any trust points with people.
Yeah, almost a lack of humility, I think, isn't it? So I'm going to accept fear of creativity and it is going to be banished from our industry. So you're going to be free now. Every client that you're working with, every agency team, there is going to be a lack of fear of those creative ideas, which...
I've lied to it already.
Yeah, I can't wait. I'm going to fast forward through the programming to watch the ads again. So fear of creativity is staying here. Before you go, is there anything that you would like to bring out that you think is down here in Marketing Room 101 that you would like to return to the industry?
Again, I think it's like the trust of creativity. Believe in the impact and the power of a good idea, what it can do for my brand and for me. I would love to see that come back again. I would love to. I'm not saying everybody should be driving around in Porsches again, like in the old days, and having naps like in Mad Men after you've drunk some cognac at 3:00.
There's a middle ground, right?
Yeah, I came in at the end of that, and I don't really want to see those old days of sexism and all that kind of stuff. But what I do like is the reverence of a good idea and the importance of understanding that this idea can change lives. If you do something big enough and loud enough and unashamedly different enough and sit your brand in the middle of it, you can change everything. And I naively believe that still to this day. You know, if people were to put creativity back on a pedestal again, an understanding of getting talented people with talented minds and having our version of David Bowie sat at that table, coming up with ideas and scaring everybody. And look what they've come up with now. I remember even thinking that with me and Al years ago. You could taste it. They were a bit afraid of us. Do you know what I mean? My old boss used to call us the oiks. And what he meant, it was done in a humorous way and warmth. But there was an element of, I'm not sure what these guys, they're slightly a bit punk rock for us. And that uncomfortability seems to be lost at the moment. Everybody wants everybody to be the same, talk the same. And get on well with clients. And like back in the day when people have temper tantrums and scream at a client and, you lose the business or you create, it was an energy. The most important thing is the idea. And if things get broken on the way, fine. But if you end up with something that has impact, has people talking about it, have you seen that ad? That is what I think is lost. And I think because the importance of creativity is kind of way down on people's list now, and I realize we have all this time in the year and then literally 2 days to come up with a brilliant idea. I find that weird. And we've created this environment.
I think we take that as almost a pitch to every marketer in the country, to every agency in the country, to almost trust the outliers, trust the weirdos. You mentioned who's the David Bowie in your organization, and buying into the fact that person is different.
Exactly. I really believe that. There's a couple of guys that's been in our company that in the past, I could see everybody just uncomfortable. Even I felt uncomfortable. Do you know what I mean? I was like, this guy's weird, man. And he comes out with some weird shit. And then you see his work come to life. And I think everybody has to have the right headset to be able to kind of go, I don't quite get it, but there's something there. And these youngsters are laughing at this idea. Well, what am I missing? Yeah. To open yourself up, to not always know the answers, but also to jump on board very quickly with something that if we do that and we get that one right, no one else has done this. And I think sometimes it's easier to embrace something that you can see the end outcome in an instant, and it could be good, but I don't doubt it will ever be great.
That feels to me like the perfect place to finish and the perfect note to finish on. But quickly before I do let you leave this wretched place, you may not be aware that this podcast has one super fan, only one, who also happens to be my brother, and he doesn't work in the industry. Oh, wow. And reluctantly, I've decided to give him the chance to ask each guest one question. So he did want to ask you a question, and that question is, if you could tango one person in the world, who would it be?
I was really instantly easy because it's fresh in mind. And I'll give you a clue. He now runs the States again. And
weirdly, while you're talking, I was thinking he's going to say Donald Trump for this.
Yeah, that's where I mean, because it's fresh and it's just so soul destroying. They didn't just do it once; they've done it twice, and he represents everything I dislike about humans and greed and dumbing down of information and salespeople. He's the ultimate awful salesman. It's just disheartening, and it just feels like the world's gone back in time again. Just as you thought, it's getting better. We're getting more understanding, more empathy in the world. We've got somebody who's denying women the control of their own bodies, who's just has no empathy for people who don't look like him, who's screaming about people eating your dogs and nonsense. And I know it shouldn't be something political, but one of the most powerful countries in the world, and they've re-elected this awful, awful person.
I think he symbolises a lot of what is frightening in the modern media landscape as well, doesn't he? Just you look at that path to the second term and you think, regardless of politics, I'm almost scared about how information travels and about how influence works in the 21st century.
And like his bed partners, they're all sociopath millionaires, just dead shark eyes when you see them talking, and you just think, oh my God, this is the thing that I thought in my lifetime, I get to my age, would be a thing of the past. I really did believe that. And it just looks like, oh my God, there's another 20 years of these horrible people, and they're thrusting us into useless wars and into distrust of each other and dislike of anybody that doesn't look like me. And it's just like, it's tiresome. It's really soul destroying, I think.
So let's use a trust in creativity. Let's banish the fear of creativity, and let's use that to make the world a better place, but I suppose more importantly, help brands just fill the world with just a bit more fun, a bit more entertainment, lighten the place up a little bit, I guess, is the best thing we can do.
We need that. Use that format to entertain people as opposed to make you kind of like, I hate you. You're trying to sell me something.
Trevor, how can people find you? How can they find Quiet Storm? How can they support Create Not Hate?
Online, I'll get in contact with like either Summer or Rania Robinson at Quiet Storm. Online, we're there. We've got our website. Just put us in the Google. And Create Not Hate is something that I don't want it to be a passion project. I want it to be a project that is on everybody's lips and people want to be involved because it's for the good of the industry. It's not the good of a few individuals. And it's something that if the industry, they're not careful, it will die out because people will just see it's not for them. So, yeah, people can reach out to us and we'll be ready to do some work.
Amazing. Thank you very much, Trevor.
Thank you.
So that was my conversation in Marketing Room 101 with Trevor Robinson. If you enjoyed it, could you please leave me a review wherever you listen to your podcasts? Because doing so tells Spotify and Apple, etc. to introduce more people to the show, which in turn makes me feel like my time and effort placed into producing the damn thing isn't completely wasted. This podcast is not sponsored by Principals Agency. If it was, it would probably be filmed like every other podcast these days. But as it's where I work and they give me and everyone else a free day off every week, which I spend doing this, I feel obliged to give it a plug. At Principals, we're obsessed with the word unforgettable, meaning we help everyday brands come to mind quicker and stay there longer. We do this using a set of principles the team and I developed. This means making brands distinctive, entertaining, visible, and consistent. If you'd like to chat about how we can help you or learn more about the principles of unforgettable brands, just pop me, Ben Norman, or Principals Agency a message on LinkedIn, or head to principalsagency.co.uk.